More good news out of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where a federal court has permanently dismissed a right-wing lawsuit challenging that state's maintenance of its voter rolls. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started.
You know, Paige, we're kind of on a roll here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Just a few days ago, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered some good news when it refused a RNC effort to get the U.S. Supreme Court to weigh in on another one of these battles, legal challenges involving ballots that have slight defects and whether voters can fix them. This one involving a state election where nevertheless, even though it involves state elections, the RNC wanted the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene under the fringe independent state legislature theory. We saw a victory for voters out of a different federal court involving misdated and undated ballots. So, you know, some good news happening there in Pennsylvania. And now we have this new addition to the pile of good news, which is that a right-wing lawsuit that was challenging the state's voter roll maintenance practices. It had been dismissed once, but with the allowance that they could refile to fix the deficiencies. Well, I guess they chose not to, or they missed the deadlines too, because now a federal judge has dismissed the case with prejudice, which means no more chances. That this case is now dead and buried.
Right. Last year before the election, the 1789 Foundation, also known sometimes as Citizen AG, filed this lawsuit in Pennsylvania claiming that there were over 277,000 Pennsylvanians on the voter rolls who were no longer eligible to vote and should be blocked from casting a ballot in the 2024 election. Lawsuit didn't get very far. They didn't get what they wanted. You know, 250,000 people were not kicked off the rolls in Pennsylvania. But Marc, this is part of something we have talked about time and time again about this large network of right-wing organizations filing lawsuits in major states. It tends to be in swing states, challenging that there are hundreds of thousands of people on the voter rolls who are no longer registered to vote and should be purged.
Yeah, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. You know, we talk a lot about how there is like this bizarre war on drop boxes. There is also this bizarre sort of conspiracy-laden theory that Republicans and their allies have that these voter rolls have all of these illegal voters, and there are all these people who shouldn't be on the rolls, and that they have to be purged, and they have to be cleaned, and there have to be new requirements. And you know, it has really very little basis in fact. Sure, states want to have clean voter rolls, but the main reason to want clean voter rolls is because it's easier to administer elections. I mean, if someone dies and their name is still in the voter roll, they're not going to vote, right? They're not alive anymore. And the craziest part of all these conspiracies, Paige, and sometimes I have a hard time keeping these straight because they're not internally consistent. On the one hand, they want all these folks purged by the state. They also, by the way, want to be able to challenge voters through sort of private vigilante efforts. But on the other hand, they want all of the states to leave the multi-state compact that actually allows for the cleaning of the voter rolls and the removing of people who have died or have moved.
We've talked about that before. That multi-state compact is called ERIC. It allows states to voluntarily join and share information with member states about voters who may have moved, may have registered to vote in another state. It's an effort to help states maintain their voter rolls. We've talked about this time and time again. There are a number of federal laws that oversee voter roll list maintenance. The main one is the National Voter Registration Act, or NVRA. States also have their own rules about how they maintain their voter rolls. But if you asked Republicans, it feels like they would tell you basically every single state is in violation of the NVRA and their own state's voter rolls about how they clean their list, maintain their voter list. Now, the 1789 Foundation filed this lawsuit in Pennsylvania. They also filed lawsuits last year in Arizona and Wisconsin. In Arizona, they claimed that there were 1.2 million voters on the rolls who shouldn't be on there. They voluntarily dismissed their case there. And in Wisconsin, like you said, they're challenging that thing that would help states maintain voter rolls. They're challenging Wisconsin's participation in ERIC, saying that the state is illegally sharing voter records and driving information with ERIC.
Yeah, and it's really hard to figure out what's going on here. You know, whether this is a messaging tactic or whether this is a legal strategy, whether it's a legal strategy masquerading as a messaging tactic, it's really hard to say. I mean, as you said, we saw a lot of these lawsuits before the election. Some of them now seem to have gone by the wayside. They were dismissed, or they've been voluntarily discarded, or they're just not being pursued. And it's not clear, again, what's like behind this, whether it's just like this was a stunt before the election. It was like to set up a permission structure or an excuse structure for Donald Trump if he lost. They genuinely believed it, but now the election's over. They've moved on to other things. I mean, it's really hard to know what makes the right wing tick about all this. What we do know, though, is that it does roll forward from one cycle to the next, because other tactics around, as you say, these purges continue to this day. I mean, you point out what's going on in Wisconsin and what's going on in some of the other states. I would argue that the whole made up thing behind the proof of citizenship is another piece of this that's like part disenfranchisement effort. Like, let's figure out how we kick people off the rolls, maybe make it harder to register for people we don't want to register. So it's kind of got that angle. But there also is this sort of like, maybe messaging part behind it. But I don't know what your theory is. I guess my ultimate theory is that they want to have as many avenues to later complain about the outcome of elections they don't like.
Marc, I agree with you. I do think it's mainly messaging and, giving Republicans a reason why they lost when they lose elections, blaming it on voter rolls rather than candidates or policies. Because logistically, one would think after a big election, before the next midterm or next presidential election, right now would be the time to file a lawsuit to say we think the voter rolls aren't being properly maintained, because you don't have the rush of a major federal election, standing on the calendar that could force things to stop because you have an election coming up and like you don't have time to go through the voter list. Right now would be a prime time to file those kinds of lawsuits if you were actually concerned about voter list maintenance. But as we've seen, the 1789 Foundation, they were given a chance to refile their complaint, to amend their complaint, and to keep their lawsuit going. And they chose basically just to ghost the court and not do anything and get their case dismissed with prejudice.
Yeah. So look, we track all of these lawsuits at Democracy Docket so that you don't have to. We report on all these lawsuits so that you will know what's going on. And we provide videos like this so that you can contextualize how one lawsuit in one state on one kind of issue impacts other states and the overall narrative that Republicans are trying to spin and how Democrats are fighting back. So do me a favor. Click on the subscribe link. We're trying to grow our YouTube channel. We want you to be a YouTube subscriber. It's free. So it's the easiest thing you can do by pressing the subscribe button now. And also consider becoming a Democracy Docket subscriber to our free newsletters, or if you want even more content to our premium newsletters, the link to those are above and in the description below. But please make sure you are staying informed, and Democracy Docket is the best way to do it. But Paige, I want to talk about how this fits into the broader mosaic that we are seeing around the country. So one of the things I have been particularly focused on in past years are third party voter challenges. This is where right-wing outfits sort of generate lists of voters, and then individual citizens or vigilante organizations go through those lists and then submit these mass spreadsheets to counties seeking to have those people removed. And we have seen how the errors that can cause and the problems that can cause for election officials. We've seen some states pass laws that make it harder to register or create criminal penalties if you're registered in one state, you move someplace else and you didn't call the first state to tell them to unregister you. I don't know who the hell ever does that. But anyway, like, we've seen all these different tactics, all surrounding the voting rolls. And you would think that one of the ways the Republicans might want to solve this, other than by joining Eric, would be to embrace something like same-day registration, right? Or automatic voter registration, where you essentially wind up having relatively clean rolls because people are registering anew, and then that then creates a record for them to be removed someplace else. But of course, Republicans oppose all of those things because they kind of want the excuse, and And Paige, because they don't want people to vote. And they know that if they make voter registration harder, and if they make it sound more threatening to people, who are they going to disenfranchise? They're going to disenfranchise younger voters, first-time voters, voters with fewer resources, and they think that's going to help them electorally.
Right, Marc, every time we talk about this, something I think about is last year before the 2024 election, Texas officials put out this big press release about how they removed almost 1 million voters from the rolls. And it was something they were celebrating and that they were proud of. You know, we've removed 1 million people from Texas's voter rolls. And it's like, why would you, one, celebrate removing voters from the rolls? And two, they made it seem like they were doing some grand, one-off thing to clean the voter rolls before the 2024 election. But that was a part of normal list maintenance. And I felt it was very weird to see Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton celebrating voter removals and making it seem like it was something he himself had brought along when it was, counties doing what they were supposed to do, enforcing voter list maintenance rules that were on the books. And why celebrate it weeks before the election unless you're trying to scare people into not voting?
Look, anytime Ken Paxton is celebrating is a bad day for democracy. So please make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters, or if you want more, it's premium content. And make sure you are subscribed to this channel so you're kept up to date on all of our video content. We will see you next time.